Hey jewelry class, this is Mrs. Gardner and we're going to be working with epoxy resin, but the prep is a big part of getting it ready to make your jewelry, and epoxy resin will get mixed later. So I'm just going to show you how to kind of prepare some bezels a couple different ways, and here are some of the tools that you see in front of you that we'll be using, but I'll be getting these out of the way. Some tweezers, scissors, some pliers. I'm just going to move them for now. Sometimes some glue, and then some packing tape that's clear. And then have what's left here, I have, let's see, I'm going to show you how to make bottle cap bezels. A bezel is just kind of like a little pan or plate with sides on it. Like here's a ready-made bezel that you can buy that is really like a dish. You can pour resin right into it. I mean, it's like ready-made. And you can see that I have one that I used in the past and made a sample, where this is like the liquid epoxy resin that has, of course, cured. And underneath we have a background and some little spangles and jewels and what's that? Glitter in there, things like that. And then these are from bottle caps. Now here are 3 samples from the past. These have a couple little floating spangle, kind of confetti musical notes that are kind of on an upper layer. And then there's the background from some music sheets. And then this is from a piece of magazine in the background, and then a little charm that was added kind of into the surface but into the resin. And then, sorry, that's the school bell. And then this is from a student. She had probably cut that out of maybe like a magazine or something like that. Now this little odd piece is actually a game piece. I don't have them anymore. They got thrown away on accident. But you can see it was flat on one side, see-through, already had color, and the other side was also just as flat. Well, it had little edges that came up like a wall, like a bezel. That's just a jewelry term. And you pour it in, threw in a little spangle there, so it's kind of interesting. You can always drill a hole in this later and do things with it, make some more jewelry. So I'm going to go ahead and lay these aside. And these are just some neat things. You can buy hairpins and, let's see, blanks. In other words, things that haven't been finished out yet, like this ring. And here's a ring that's been finished. It has cupcake sprinkles. In fact, I have them here. These are the cupcake sprinkles I used for this. And I mixed clear resin. And I had set it up just like this, kind of jammed into styrofoam to prop it up, so my hands were free and it stayed nice and level while it cured overnight. So that was a favorite. Here's a hairpin. Now this doesn't actually have walls like a regular bezel, but just by the way, liquid kind of domes, especially resin really domes, just like a water drop would. This was like 1 drop of resin that had glitter and some neat things inside of it. And this is a blank ring that doesn't have walls on it, but I'm going to try it. It has natural rust because it got wet, and I thought it was kind of a neat pattern, so I'm going to put resin right over that. So I'm going to put these, so this is kind of like set up. But a bottle cap is a nice way to start. It's simple. The quarters here because it's a neat way to size it up. But something I got is like a clear cabochon plastic piece that really is made to go into and stick onto some kind of pattern paper underneath, and you pop that on there and it's instant, but we're going to be pouring our own. But I found out that this is really handy if you want to be able to see what your image is going to be. I'm going to push these out of the way now. Like I'm going to take an old photo that has my daughter in it, and I'm going to be just moving this around. I mean, you can capture whatever you want, changes composition every time you move it. But this way I can actually see what I'm going to get before I cut it out. And so that'll come in really handy. And this is a neat old paper sheet that I had. Same thing, you can see what you're going to get. But in the old days, we'd just use a quarter, and we would just kind of think about what's underneath, and we would trace it. So either way works. So I'm going to go ahead and make a bottle cap resin. Let's see, I'm going to grab a Sharpie so you can really see what I'm doing with this. And let's see, I'll try this way. I'm going to go ahead and, I think I'm just going to get her centered there. Now, this piece will really be a little bit bigger than what I will actually, oops, moved it. See if I can get it back on there. Okay, so there's my composition. Get the cap back on here, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut it out. But when I cut it out, I have to cut it out smaller. So let me just kind of rough cut around her. Get all her friends out of the picture there. There, because that's a big piece to mess with there. I'm gonna cut off. I'm gonna try to be consistent and cut away. I'm cutting smaller on the inside of that mark. Now you can take your time more, of course, when you're in class and you're going to be doing this. I'm kind of rushing a little bit. Now, I'm going to use packing tape to seal this in. If you just got this paper wet, it might go kind of translucent, kind of see-through, and ruin the image. So a couple ways to kind of seal it in. You know, because sometimes you have to seal wood or other porous things like paper, or like bubbles come out, or it goes translucent. So one way is to actually use glue and brush it on with a cheap brush, let it dry, and then do it again, and that seals it. But this way is packing tape. So I'm just going to get some clear packing tape. You have to watch out with packing tape because it has static. Now I'm going to go ahead and, let's see, I'm looking for a place that doesn't have funny little marks. Usually it's not in the middle, but okay, I'm just going to put it right here. Try not to trap any bubbles. Now I'll go ahead and just seal it over. So I'm sealing it in. Oops. Okay. So you can see I've just sealed it in. I'm trying to seal it in from the moisture. I'm going to go ahead and trim it out a little bit, get that sticky part away. Okay. And I have a little wooden stick here that's kind of handy. Kind of see if I can burnish that in. Try to get that gap. I want to be able to cut as close as I can to the edge there. So I'm trying to get that little air gap out of the way there, sealed in more. That's pretty good there. Sometimes I just use my fingernail like this. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut it out. I don't want to get into air gap. It's really hard not to have it. I mean, it's there, especially if you have thick paper. So I'm giving a little extra, so I don't want the resin to seep in and kind of leave a wet spot on the edge somewhere. But I do also want it to still fit inside of my bottle cap. Basically, the quarter kind of nestles right into that bottle cap. Okay. And so here's one I had already bent out, and I'll show you how to do that too. Yep, lays in there nice, just like that. Oh my goodness. And so, oops, come out. There it is. And so I'm going to go ahead and take my kind of flat nose pliers here, and I'm going to bend it out a little bit. I won't do the whole thing. Sorry about my phone ringing back there. Didn't think about that one. I'm going to really thank who called me. So you can see I'm kind of doing a little bit at a time, but I do want to keep that dish. I don't want to like flatten it out or I'll have nothing to hold the resin in. So you can see that little by little you just kind of work your way around and how it transforms into more of a nice picture frame kind of bezel. Okay, like that. Now, I suppose you could glue this in if you want lay flat. I sometimes would have these kind of float up a little bit with the resin, but it's okay. If it lays in there pretty well, you know, resin can go under, you can push it back down, things like that. This is one I did exactly the same way. You can see there's a little bit of a clear space around it, but my plan is to take some beads. This is her favorite color, and I'm gonna work once I have resin in there, I'm gonna make beads kind of nestle into that edge and sprinkle some other colors in there. So it'll kind of frame her up nicely, so you won't see that clear edge there. And also, I have a tool that punches, or you can actually drill the hole later. Sometimes we drill it ahead of time and put it about halfway down, but I've had people who punch too low and then the resin seeps out the hole. So, you know, that can be done a little bit later. Just don't overflow it. You want to have some place to punch that hole. This one's almost overflow. Resin likes to dome a little bit, which is a nice effect. Okay. And so, let's see, bottle cap, flat nose pliers, flaring out the edge, punch hole before or after, just be careful about that. And we got our image, trimmed it, laminated it on both sides with the clear packing tape. Another way I'm going to show you, just for the bottle cap resin, will be, let's say I take this, and this time I'll just use the quarter, kind of like this right here. And you can choose either way when you do yours. Save this for another project. And I'm just gonna barely cut it. See, I'm not gonna be laminating it this time, so I'm not gonna have that extra tape hanging out over the edge that I'm gonna be worried about. So I'm trying to just cut fairly neatly here. Just cutting off a little bit so I don't see that outline. If I cut on the outside line, it might not fit very well down the side, that bottle cap. Okay, that'll be good. And then I have a little scrap of non-stick surface. That's just wax paper and a little bit of glue. You can use Mod Podge, of course, if you have that handy. There it is. But I'm just going to go across it. Oops. There we go. And it's your choice. Some people have things that if, let's say it's watercolor paper, and if you got it wet with the glue, it might run or move your colors around. Then maybe you should laminate if you're going to do that. But magazines and things, you know, you can do pretty well just coating it. Now, I would let that dry. It wouldn't take that long. And then imagine I could turn it over, do the other side, let that dry. Get the edges, of course, too, because that's where you don't want the resin to seep in, is right on those edges especially. And then I would just to give a second coat. So basically the same thing as kind of like laminating, all right? And I am going to stop right there, and I'll show you another technique in another video.